Okay.
This is probably a good time for us to let you also join the conversation. So if you have questions, please.
I guess my question was prompted by one of the comments a little earlier, and it's, I guess, very specific to the timing of Sakahàn. I wondered whether the timing of the exhibition had anything to do with countering the celebrations of Samuel de Champlain's arrival, and that is a 400-year celebration that's going to be happening later this summer. So I wondered if that had anything to do with the timing of this exhibition.
Of course. No, there are a lot of coincidences. Certainly we're aware that there's going to be a celebration of Samuel Champlain arriving. That's why we're very excited to have Jeff Thomas's participation in the exhibition, to do a series of 400 portraits on the Champlain Monument, it's a continuation of a series of really marking the Aboriginal presence in this area. So that can be interpreted as a bit of a counter-narrative, but it's not an exclusive one because it involves making portraits of everyone. It's not only that as an anniversary, it's the 250th, I think, anniversary of the Royal Proclamation. It's also the 400th anniversary of the Turo Wampum. So there are a lot of coalescences, let's say, that are happening, not obviously by our design, but that are happening, and maybe I think that means something. I think that it's significant, and we note it. And thank you for asking that question, so I can make others aware of it.
Thank you also, Greg. Could you tell us a little bit more about Jeff's work, since he's not here right now?
Sure. So Jeff Thomas has an ongoing series he started back in the early 2000s of making photographs at the Samuel de Champlain Monument, which is behind the gallery on Nepean Point. And that monument used to have a scout at the base of the monument. It was later determined to be an Anishinaabe scout. This scout was in a very diminutive position, and early in the, I'm getting my dates wrong now, in the late 90s, I think it was that the Assembly of First Nations decided to have a bit of a media stunt there and draw attention to broader issues in Aboriginal Canada by using that scout to point out what's wrong with the relationship between Aboriginal peoples in Canada and in this instance the Government of Canada, and the lack of recognition for treaties and agreements. So they pointed out that the scout was barely clothed, it was subservient to Champlain, and they covered the scout with a blanket, and it became quite a big debate here in Ottawa. I don't know how far it spread out, but about what this idea of history, and then the erasure of history, a kind of a cultural amnesia, this process of, well, if something's brought to the fore, we can just take it away and it'll go away. So that's in effect what happened with the scout. The National Capital Commission decided to remove the scout. This would make the controversy go away. Of course it didn't, and Jeff Thomas's work is all about reconnecting, reigniting that debate, that you can't just take something away and make it go away, that there's an important message, an important dialogue that needs to occur, to continue, and that's essentially what that work is about.
I wanted to ask a question about Sakahàn. Diane Nemiroff mentioned that the Musiciens de la Terre had a certain criteria that it developed for its exhibit, and just be interested to know, what was your criteria for Sakahàn? What were the criteria that you...
You make me answer the criteria. You know, really, it was looking. We didn't have a checklist. We knew that we wanted to do an exhibition that was international in scope. So we just went out to learn as much as we could and to get as much learn about great artists, and then learn about their works, and then put those together, images of those works. We literally had a very large room, and we laid out works, and then go through that whole curatorial process of refining and refining and refining, and Sakahàn is the result of that. So it was the works were selected because of their strength, because of how the dialogues that were happening between them, and you know, that has been mentioned. So I think, you know, it seems to have worked. I don't know. Now, I don't want to say everything, because we've had an amazing process, the three of us working together on this. Candice and Christine are amazing, and the show couldn't have happened without them, obviously. But we've really had this incredible way of working with each other and coming to a consensus on things with not too much arm wrestling. None of which I would have won anyway. But you know, here we are. So it's been great. I've really very, very much grown and learned so much from working with both of you. So great to have an opportunity to express that as well. Thanks.
Well, I'd like to congratulate you. It's an incredibly powerful exhibit.
Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Coble, and I just put my gallery staff tag in my pocket. My boss is beside me. But I felt really strongly that I wanted to say something to the artist because for me this has really come full circle. I come from a really small town in northern Alberta, about 3,000 people, highest rate of violence, highest rate of teenage pregnancy in all of Canada. When I was 15 years old, I came to Ottawa, and I went to Museum of Civilization, and I saw an exhibition called Reservation X. And when I was there, it was the first time that I had learned about residential schools. When I was there, it was the first time that I had learned about other Indigenous people who were not Métis or Cree that had some of the same issues around identity that I had. When I was there, I read every single thing on the wall, and I spent my whole day there when I could have been doing other things. And somebody had said a question about, you know, putting Indigenous artists in a box. And I think that day I felt really strongly that I was happy for that box to exist, because it was somewhere I could go to see some of the things that I wasn't able to articulate. And this morning, part of my role is to bring Indigenous youth from 8 years old to 17 to see some of the art. And this morning I took a group of about just under 40 youth, and I brought them in to come and see some of the artwork. And being able to express political, social, cultural issues through art for me is very important. And to pass that message on to people is something very special. And when I took them to see Nadia Meer's piece of the Indian Act, I asked how many people know what the Indian Act is. I think 3 youth had raised their hand. They were maybe about 14 or 15 years old, maybe 13. But I know that sitting in this room, we're all really very privileged to know, and maybe our children, even at a young age, are privileged to know about things like the Indian Act, to hear our stories and talk about shamans. But none of the kids knew. There was maybe 2 that had heard of what a shaman was. Just a few, like I said, that had heard about the Indian Act. And to me, it was an important reminder that maybe right now we do need a box. And maybe right now some of you are ready to jump out of the box, and that's okay too. But there's a lot of young people who I think crave that connection with looking at other Indigenous people. Maybe not, they don't even know it, but once they see it, they realize that all their lights in their head go off, and they can see themselves and not see, you know, the highest rate of violence in Canada or the highest teenage pregnancy. And so I just wanted to say thanks to the curators and thanks to Greg for making Sakahàn International Indigenous Art. And this is going to be an amazing experience for a lot of young people to come and see all of the social, political, cultural issues that you talk about in your works. Hi, hi.
I just wanted to echo that this is an extraordinary exhibition. As kind of a critic or a critical person, I went in there looking for failures, and I didn't see one thing I didn't like. And I think that is not only the selection of the artwork, it's the work of individual artists. We heard earlier about this notion of at a previous time there might have been a sense of lack of maturity. That's impossible now to make any claim like that. I hunger for all the pieces that were missing, that you had to edit through. It must have been a very painful thing. I also see a work of incredibly generous and intelligent curation. You didn't let anybody take up too much room. You know, you could have crowded in with a lot of masterworks from any one person. One thing works after the other, feeds back into each other. I've seen a lot of these works before, but they were renewed. They came up in a different, the dialogue was entirely different. So I want to ask, is this just great curation, or is this great Aboriginal curation? Could non-Aboriginal people have done this show?
I don't think they've ever tried. So that, I mean, I believe anybody can do anything, really, deep down. But of course, when you have a particular focus and a particular desire and really heartfelt connection with the work and its presentation, that something else starts to happen. And I think maybe curatorship is something that's more passive for other curators, but I've seen, you know, the commitment and the energy in Candice and Christine, and you're seeing the results of that too. So.
And I'd like to say that it's really important to recognize the people that aren't sitting on this stage, the incredible team at the gallery. But also, I think we started with, when there was a question about criteria, this idea that there was so much we did not know. And I think in order to do this exhibition, we recognized from the very start, from the very beginning, that we would rely on the eyes and the knowledge and the understanding of various people who were not only advising us on the selection of artists, but giving us very good critical feedback. When we had a couple of times quite, I think, titles that wouldn't have done the same thing as this title was, they told us that was wrong. When we had initial selections, their honesty and their integrity in providing us with that feedback was absolutely paramount. So I'd also like to recognize the role of Leanne Martin, who was here with us. I don't know if she's still here this afternoon, and as well as Megan Tamatai Kinal, and these are only two of advisors who are working with us from around the world. We had people from Japan, and Yuya Wan, who is right here filming, was integral to the process. So it's in fact, I think, what Greg was trying to point to is part of the reason why there are such rich conversations between such great work is because we had rich conversations amongst ourselves.
after yesterday evening and today, I'm thinking of you right now as the Sakahàn group of artists. That's a new category for you. And because you've been making these connections, they may become a movement. You can continue to connect, maybe collaborate after. If, from an artistic perspective, you're all sharing space now, and you seem to be very happy to be sharing that artistic space. So what would you say are some of the key distinctions about this collection of art?
I'll just add, for me personally, I've never been in an exhibition like this. And look, I'm sure if you go through the catalogue of artists and look at their bios, there's probably lots of artists who've been in biennales and triennials and quinquennials. But if you ask them, they will tell you they've never been in a show like this before. This really is the first one, and we just can't wait to do more. I personally, to be in a show like this where there's no sense of you know, the romantic or the exotic that we get thrown at, that gets thrown at us so much. Ideas of the noble savage and the primitive, they're all gone, and maybe this is signposts a new time for all of us, I think, as artists. Yeah, it's just so exciting. I just can't believe there's so much. It's such a big show, and the quality of the works, room after room, and the level of curation in those rooms is just is great. So that's all I want to say.
We've been talking about classification, being inside the box, so on and so forth. And I just want to pose a question to everybody that's on stage about this classification in the box that we're talking about, being Indigenous. So once we're outside of the box and outside the classification, does it become post-Indigenous?
Charlotte, do you have an answer for that?
Maybe later. When you first got onto the stage, I think I saw you, Nick Galan, and didn't you have a camera in your hand? Didn't you take a photograph of the audience? I did. Yeah. I'd really like to know what the artists think their audience, who are the audiences, and it might be in the plural that you're directing your work towards.
Did everybody hear that?
Generally speaking, the audience of the work I create is anybody who needs to see it or find it or experience it. I don't, like the music I listen to, I don't choose that music. It finds me, and it finds me because I connect with it and experience in my life. The art is the same. And that audience that comes across my work needs to see it. They need to experience it. It's a reflection of how they view the world. It's a reflection of themselves and how they define their experience. So that's what the work is, and I don't choose the audience.
I paint for myself, and if I don't like a work, well, I have the opportunity to change and learn from it. But fundamentally, you know, it's creating is a very, as a painter, it's a very solitary act, and you're the first person to see what you're doing. You become really the first viewer, and sure, of course, in the end, too, once it leaves your studio, it's in the public domain. Now, I think there's some. I really don't operate that way, where I have a specific idea who I'm going to be painting for, unless, of course, it's a commission. That would be another story.
This morning, I was walking through the gallery, and it was full of Inuit, First Nations, and Métis children, and
and that was a brilliant start, I thought. So I think the gallery's achieved a huge amount just with that. There was an exhibition called Te Māori 25 years ago in New Zealand, and it was the first time that busloads of Māori visited the museum. Children, old people were sitting down on the grounds, they were crying over the artworks, and that was a major transformation in our country, and to see that here is brilliant.
Yep, I make work for my friends and family, and I hope that they come to an art gallery to see it. And when I make it, I want them to be able to enjoy it. I want them to feel empowered by it. So that's you are not my audience. I just make them about you. That's all.
Another question?